Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken.
Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken.
My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge.
Trust in him at all times, people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge.
Let's sing to him.
If I told you my story, you would hear a hope that wouldn't let go. And if I told you my story, you would hear love that never gave up. And if I told you my story, you would hear life, but it wasn't mine. If I should speak, then let it be of the grace that is greater than all my sin. Of when justice was served, and when mercy wins, of the kindness of Jesus that draws me in. Oh, to tell you my story is to tell of him. And if I told you my story, you would hear the victory over the enemy. If I told you my story, you would hear freedom that was won for me. And if I told you my story, you would hear mine overcome the grave. If I should speak, then let it be of the grace that is greater than all my sin. Of when justice was served, and when mercy wins, of the kindness of Jesus that draws me in. How to tell you my story is to tell of him. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. For the grace that is greater than all my sin, of when justice was served, and when mercy wins, of the kindness of Jesus that draws me in. Oh, to tell you my story is to tell of him. Oh, to tell you my story is to tell of him. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. In the secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness you are there. In the secret, In the quiet hour I wait only for you. I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. I'm reaching for the highest goal, so I might receive the prize. Pressing onward, pushing every hindrance aside, out of my way, 'cause I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. In the secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness you are there.
As we come to sing our last song, My All in All, I thought I'd read these words. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
You are my strength when I am weak. You are the treasure that I seek. You are my all in all. Seeking you as a precious jewel, Lord, to give up might be a fool. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Taking my sin, my cross, my shame, rising again, I bless your name. You are my all in all. When I fall down, you pick me up. When I am dry, you fill my cup. You are my all in all. Jesus, you're the Lamb of God. Worthy is your name. Jesus, you're the Lamb of God. Worthy is your name. Jesus, you're the Lamb of God. Worthy is your name. Jesus, you're the Lamb of God. Worthy is your name.
As we go to prayer, I have a note that Vicky Smith's dad is still on the ventilator, and so and he's still having trouble with dialysis, I guess. So pray for Garen and his healing. Norm is in recovery, but is still at the is it, you call it nursing home? Or
Rehab.
Rehab, still rehab, excuse me. And he says he'd like to come home, but that's not yet. That'll be soon. It's been quite a summer, I'm sure, for those two. Other things that you're aware that we can pray about? Besides all the things we know we need to pray about? Yes?
Yeah, I had a stress test done a couple of weeks ago, and I went to the doctor on Thursday, and my bypass surgery will be 30 years old the end of January. And he said it was the most beautiful set of pictures he ever saw. There wasn't anything out of place, so I'm good for
Wow.
20 years.
See, because, like, Dick told me that you were his stressed. I don't know if that's true. But that's great. Isn't that so cool, though, you know? And probably 30 years ago, you didn't think it'd last as
Oh,
long.
no, I knew I would. I was so young.
That's a spirit. That's great. Other things we're aware of? Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. God, you bless us with fellowship and with kindness and love for one another. Oh, so many good things. And we are thankful for a 62-year marriage. We are thankful for a young lady, daughter of this church, who is getting married. We're thankful for the ways in which you have cared for us, even in our grief, as Cindy goes through this loss of her father. We ask for your presence there as Vicki is loving her dad and wanting to do the right thing as a daughter in this tough situation. God, you know the other circumstances that surround us, the needs that we have, the fears, the aches, the concerns. And we lift those to you now, God. We lift up our sometimes failing discipleship, or sometimes unkind ways, or sometimes incomplete sense of discipleship. God, you understand the pressures that we are under. Sometimes we make too much of it. Sometimes we're actually minimizing what is in fact a crushing weight. And so God, I ask you to be with any of those spirits out here today who feel a little crushed by circumstances. They're just about beyond their control. Whatever that burden is, God, we echo the words of Peter when he said, cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. So God, we cast those cares for those whom we love, those cares for our country, those cares for our world, that you would intervene in your gracious way and bring healing. And to that end, God, we ask that your kingdom would come and would be present here. We realize it's always not yet. We're not quite at the kingdom time, but we still live as if that is on its way. And so we share together in the prayer that your Son taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Well, what I've taken to lately this summer, and I hope it's been all right for you, is I've sort of made you all my de facto children's group. Because I didn't want to out just a few kids that are here, you know, one or two. And so we're going to do another children's message, but this is not really a children's message. Imagine, you, Vicki, nice to see you. I didn't know that you were here. Good to see you. Welcome here. Imagine you're not so much kids, but you're youth. And you're getting ready to go back to school. You're 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And one of you can relate exactly. That's nice. And what's your level of excitement about going back to school? It's a little lower. And maybe some of the reason you're less excited is because, yes, there's classes, there's homework, but there's also that dreaded lunchroom. And in the lunchroom, there's this table. And that's where the cool kids sit. Some of you were at that table. Some of you weren't. There's this other table where other kids sit. and this other table where those kids sit. And as you think about that, you kind of hate the division, don't you? The differences between people. And the whole thing is set up to say, these kids are really the best. So, to you, my youth, my question is, where do you think, if Jesus went to your school, what table would he sit at? And in the Bible, we have a lot of times where Jesus goes to the cool kids' table and talks with them. But he doesn't belong there, does he? In fact, he goes out to this other place. He says, any of you who are burdened and heavy laden, you can come to my table. And so, just remember that whatever table you sit at, you make sure it's okay that Jesus sits there with you. Amen? Amen. Well, our message today comes at the end of what I think, at least for me and maybe for many of you, has been a tough week, because our entire country has been wrapped up in the divisions we are experiencing. I'm sure you would agree Charlottesville was bad, and that was the Saturday, and the next day we had our service, and I just said it's too soon to talk about anything. But then we heard the president speak of the Nazis in more measured tones, and then he walked that back, said, no, they're bad folks. Then he came at it again. He said there were problems on both sides, and some of them were good people, and so on. You've heard all the commentary. So what does our faith say to any of this? Or should we simply say, this is not our realm? We deal in spiritual terms. That we actually come here to hide away from those kinds of discussions. Well, that question led me to the 32nd Psalm, and I'll read it for you. Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one whose sin the Lord does not count against them, and in whose spirit is no deceit. When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Therefore, let all the faithful pray to you while you may be found. Surely the rising of the mighty waters will not reach them. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, but must be controlled by bit and bridle, or they will not come to you. Many are the woes of the wicked, but the Lord's unfailing love surrounds the one who trusts in him. Rejoice in the Lord and be glad, you righteous. Sing, all you who are upright in heart. Pray. God, it's yet another song, one of those many that is kind of a blur to us, and yet it is your word. So allow it to speak your truth. In Jesus' name, amen. So this song is a confessional song. Whether it's an individual or it's a cause or a nation, that is the start. We admit our own part in the wrong, because if we do not, if we steadfastly declare that we are righteous, and that it must have been someone else's fault, he says we're not going to be healthy. He says our bones, his bones were wasting away. In other words, our best efforts become sick and sad reflections of who we might be if only we would own what we had done wrong. He says, for day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. I don't know if you've experienced that this past week. We had one of those 80-some degree days that feels like it's 160. You know, the humidity was so big. You get out of the car, you just go, must get back to air conditioning. It's killing you. Your strength is sapped out of you. The same is true for the spouse who tells a little lie about their last trip out of town, that marriage is being sapped of its strength. It's true for a friendship where you can't really be honest with the other person. It's true for a nation, for our nation, over the issues of race, by ignoring it, by denying its power and its force for evil, by daring to suggest that Nazis, with their belief that one race of people or one kind of people is better than another, our national strength is sapped. And it cannot be repaired as long as we are in denial. But our psalmist here, he reconciles with God. He confesses his sin. And now he is close with the Lord. And it brings up one of the great verses in the Bible. You are my hiding place. The praise team is going to sing that song a little later on. One of my favorites. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. Perhaps you know how good that kind of place can be. That sense of God protecting you, of Him standing with you, even though you can't straighten out that child of yours, or your business is not going well, or the doctor's face is somewhat long as she gives you the results of the test. It isn't like good old Jane's surgery, it's worse. We know what it is to have God as our hiding place in such moments. And we sometimes extend that desire for a hiding place to our entire practice of faith. These days there's a lot of talk about safe spaces. And as much as we deride that talk, the truth is we all find our safe spaces, whether it's a familiar bar stool or a favorite pew. There are many times when we want this church to be our hiding place. Here, the din of the world can be shut out for just 1 hour. The 24-hour news cycle isn't on. Here we can be in the safety of the Lord's arms, and we can remember that we are His. And if you are like me, you love that aspect of Sunday morning. But this cannot just be a safe place. It cannot be that the world out there has no dialogue with the truths we proclaim in here. In fact, this very verse, reminds us of one of the most courageous engagements that ever happened between faith and the world. Because when I think of this verse, I'll bet you do the same thing. You think of a little woman who traveled the world speaking about the hiding place. And I bet you know her name, don't you? Who is she? Corrie ten Boom. And their family was these wonderful Dutch believers in Christ. Their vocation was watchmaking. Here's a little fun fact. You may not have known this. Corrie ten Boom was the first woman ever licensed to be a watchmaker, a female watchmaker in the Netherlands. Well, they were doing their life, and the darkness of the Nazi occupation descended upon that country, and this pious family had to decide what they would do. And soon enough, they were part of the Underground Railroad, getting Jews and resistance fighters to safety. One of the early persons was an architect who built a small hiding space within their home, and that was the famous space in which many were hidden until they could escape. So let me ask you, was this an act of private devotion, or was it an act of civil disobedience? And do you suppose that some of the people around them thought it was too political to get involved in these matters? I'm sure they did. The very hiding place was, in fact, both this deeply personal statement of faith and a deep engagement with the events of their times. And this hiding place, too, this church, must be both personal and a place that equips us to challenge what is around us and help lead ourselves and others to an alternate view. I've been reading what it was like for the Jews during World War II. I'm sure many of you have read Bitter Freedom by Yaffa Wallach, and you know that Yaffa was Rena's mother. Rena was going to be here this morning, but she wasn't able to come. Their family was caught geographically between Poland and Germany during the onset of the war. And when they came back into Germany and the Germans took control, even before the concentration camps were established, the terrible edict against the Jews was being carried out. And so in their little village, they had the Jews working at hard labor building roads. However, none of the Jews were allowed to buy any food. They literally starved whole families to death as they worked. Yaffa wrote, "The first death from hunger was a boy next door, age 16, who had always been healthy and handsome. Hunger death is frightful. People's faces swell, their eyes sink, and are without a spark of life. They become totally unrecognizable." Then, of course, there came the concentration camp horrors. At Yaffa's camp, the commandant, he would end his evening parties and social events with shooting matches. She writes, "We, the prisoners, were the targets. Sometimes target practice would be more specialized. Infants and small children were picked up by the hair and thrown up and shot in midair like birds." I remind you that you know these things. And the question is, how do people ever allow such horrors to become normal? How could Nazism ever be countenanced, either at this time or either at that time or in our own nation today? And to understand that, we need to take a little look at history. And I'll oversimplify, but there are at least two factors. The first was the submission of theology to politics. It was the end of values from God's perspective and the acceptance of this grand impression of oneself. It was nothing less than creating a graven image with an Aryan face on it. But having done all that, the question before Germany was, if we're so great, if we are the new standard of humanity, how can it be that we are doing so poorly? The sense of grievance by the majority population made it possible to support a strong man, and Hitler told them that they were truly better, but they were being held back by the others. The others were the problem all along. The Jews, they were the worst. But also those handicapped people polluted their purity. And then there were homosexuals who did so much wrong, and gypsies too. Those others, they were the true problem. So they lost their theological grounding. God and His Word bowed to the Fuhrer. Hitler was right. God is certainly on their side. That's why the Confession of Barmen is so powerful. It was written by the Confessing Church, which was a very small group from within Germany, and we have to remember that. But it is right to laud them. They gathered in Switzerland, and they wrote their statement, and here's how one section read. "We reject the false doctrine as though there were areas of our life in which we would not belong to Jesus Christ, but to other lords. Areas in which we would not need justification and sanctification through Him." The word Lord in German is the word Führer. So abandoning our theology for an ideology allowed Nazism to thrive there. We must not let that ever happen here. We must not ever agree with the idea that our race or our ethnicity is somehow better than some others. There's a second element, and something I learned anew from Rena's mother. You know, for the average person in her little village, they didn't viscerally hate Jews. They heard what the Nazis said, and they maybe agreed with some of it, but they weren't ready to go to the final solution. But when it became clear that there was a new order taking place, when it was clear that on one cold midnight the entire group of Jews would be required to muster in lines with only one suitcase of their earthly possessions, which would later be tossed onto a pile, and that they would be trucked away, well then, if that's the case, why not personally benefit by taking some of the things that they left behind? They stood to gain in such a terribly obvious way, so they looked the other way and shrugged their shoulders. And the same is true for us. We must guard against allowing our desire to be the privileged ones, we who are not facing hatred, we who just might gain in some way from others' misfortune. We have to guard against that being what causes us to not really care about these issues related to other races and other beliefs. Otherwise, we become just like those villagers, waiting for the people to be loaded and the trucks to roll. And we are better than that. Sometimes the hiding place becomes the place where we come to understand that our own theology and our own convictions. Sometimes the hiding place is the moment with God when we have become right with Him and have made a decision to stiffen our spines and say to the world that we will not go that way again. We will not countenance Nazis as an alternative choice, as just one click off normal, as part of the dialogue in this nation. We are a nation founded on the idea that all men are created equal. And we know the irony of that statement, beginning with the very word men. We take it like it meant that old English sense, like men means everyone. But we know it specifically did not. It did not mean, for example, women. Only men are created equal. And it didn't mean slaves. As we know, the Constitution found that slaves were worth 3/5 of a person. It didn't mean men who were working off their debt in passage, the indentured service. It didn't mean men without property. We know that we haven't yet achieved this lofty ideal, and yet we move towards it. I'll share a song with you for today. David's song was one of confession. And as we've done a contemporary song each time, this is one too. This song came from a tough year too, 1968. Martin Luther King, you recall, was assassinated on April 4th of that year. And you remember the nation reeling in that situation. Not to mention the backdrop of Vietnam and all that. And then on June 5th, Bob Kennedy was shot and pronounced dead the next day. And that summer, I think this song spoke to each of us. And you can sing along if you like.
Anybody here seen my old friend? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seems good they die young. You know, I just looked around and he's Anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but seems good they die young. I just looked around and he's gone. I just look around and he's gone. Didn't you love the things that they stood for? Didn't they try
all men are created equal has been a long struggle. But we keep moving toward that ideal. Through some very dark nights, we maintain that goal. And that goal is not just part of our nation's struggle and our foundation. It's also a God statement. We are all equal in terms of falling into sin. And we are all equal in our need for a Savior. The psalmist decries over and over the false differences between the rich and the poor because he's been both and he realizes that no one is better than the other. We are, all of us, created in the image of God. So bottom line, what am I asking you to do today? I'm not telling you how to vote or which party to be part of, but I am telling you to do this. Do not allow your theology to fall prey to some ideology that tells you what your itchy ears might want to hear, that you are better than someone else because of your color or